Today, we are talking about graduation and kids leaving home, specifically kids headed to college in the fall. And it is my pleasure to be interviewing our friend, my co host, Krista Gilbert, on this topic because she has done this a number of times and she is doing it again for the last time this year. We are not going to be talking about that because
Nope,
that
we're
is a
not.
whole episode on its own, or 500 episodes, but we are going to be going to the Queen celebrator, the Queen intentional conversationalist. We are going to be talking about how to launch kids from graduation to college. Now, I have done this one time. We were just calling it COVID Light, class of 2021. So it was weird because the graduation party we hosted was one of the very first gatherings I had been part of in over a year. Krista did graduate someone in COVID, like when you couldn't even look at someone correctly.
Much less graduation COVID.
Yeah, where kids were handed their diploma through a screen. So awful. And then also COVID Light, but she did it pre-COVID and is doing it again. So we are going to talk a little bit celebration and a little bit how to say those goodbyes that are so precious and important, and we want to be intentional. And they're going to be hard. There's going to be hard moments too. So this is the conversation we are stepping into. Krista, here we are.
Here we are. It is upon us. Graduation. Time is just moving fast. And some of you who graduate in May, it's moving really fast.
Yeah. We're a May graduation school district. So we want to get this going, this conversation, so we can plan. And let's talk about leading up to it. Between now and the day when the cap and gown goes on, what should we be thinking about? What are the questions we should be asking?
You know, one of the questions I ask pretty much across the board in a lot of arenas, this is not just in the graduation arena, but it very much applies here. And that is, what does success look like to you? And that's a question for you as the parent. And it's also a question for the graduate. It is a question we can ask. And you may want to word it differently because different kids respond to the language differently. But the basic question of what you will be happy if fill in the blank, if this happens. And so that is really the first thing, because everyone's going to define that differently. For some kids, like my daughter, for example, success to her was a big gathering, cute. We did white and gold and we had her senior pictures out, right? Like it looked a certain way for her. For my other son, now granted it was COVID, but he may have wanted this anyway. It was more of a like really big family dinner where that was the big celebration and it wasn't this big hoopla. And so every graduate is going to define success differently. And so a couple of questions that you can ask is, what would make this fun for you? What would make this feel special to you? What does support look like to you during this time? And those are just open-ended questions that we can ask that actually gets them thinking also about that, because they may not have thought about that at all. They haven't thought about that question. At the end, we don't want them saying, I wish you would have done this. I wish you would have done that. Or being disappointed by something that we didn't even know was in their mind. Have you ever had that experience?
Oh, never. Of course, I've had that experience like a million times. And also having a little bit of experience with what if what mom wants and what if what the graduate wants are two different things.
Exactly.
I think these questions can help meld the two because in the end, you're getting to what's most important to me and what's most important to you. And so we are doing a graduation party planning situation right now, and I really want grandparents to feel comfortable. Like, that's one of my priorities. And
Right.
she really wants to have a lot of friends. So, like, how do we make both of those a reality? So I think those questions are helpful.
And I think it helps the communication. And so much comes down to our communication with one another and how we are really setting up those expectations or those hopes that we're not even naming to the other person.
Mhm.
So how are they supposed to know? I mean, think about even that. For you to say to Genevieve, like this is a high priority for me. So what are some of your ideas on how we can make it comfortable for parents? And then now they get to be a part of that process. That's just like a completely different thing when they're involved and you're naming that, right? And now that
Mhm.
you are going to set up that situation for success because now you're communicating about it.
Mhm. And it allows for creativity. Like, maybe we
Mhm.
do a few celebrations, or maybe in order to meet those goals, but then the why is under there, so everybody knows why we have made the decisions we've made, because they fit with certain people's priorities.
Right. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like you're opening up these third ways. Like, okay, what
Mhm.
if we did a lunch with the grandparents and then afterwards we
Mhm.
have the big party or whatever? Like
Yeah.
you're starting to do that third way thinking, which you and I talk about all the time on the podcast. And it's so helpful. The reason we talk about it all the time is because it is so helpful when we're looking at decision making. How do we think beyond these polarized choices?
Okay. So let's get specific about graduation itself. How do we make the moment feel special, recognized, set apart, different? Because this is a big day for everyone.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and you and I have a whole podcast. We
Mhm.
talked about our graduation parties. And so I'm going to definitely put that in the show notes. But I think it comes down to what, what are some things that make an event set apart. I mean, this is why we have rituals. This is why we have traditions. This is why we throw parties, because we don't want it to look like every single other day of the year
Mhm.
or every other year. They've gone to school for 12 years and we want to celebrate that they've worked hard and they've gotten to this place and that this is the closing of one chapter in order to open up a new chapter in their life. And that is special. And we do want to mark that. So, what are some ways that we can do that? Well, I mean, we can think about love languages. What does your child respond to? Is it words? Is it acts of service? Is it gifts? Some of those kinds of things. You may want to focus on more of one than the other, depending on who your child is. So, like if I know my child is gifts, if one of their love languages is gifts, then I really am going to try and make the gifts that I give them really meaningful and thoughtful around graduation. Again, gifts does not mean you have to be extravagant. It means
Mhm.
thoughtful. People who have that love language, they love that you actually thought through, like you're not just throwing any random gift at them. They actually want to see that you've put some thought into it and that you've really considered like what would mean something to them. And so take the time to really
Mhm.
think through that and say, what would mean a lot to this particular child? And how can I plan now to order a gift off Etsy or, if you're having something kind of personalized and made, like how could I do that now so that it arrives on time and have that? So you're not just like 2 days before thinking, what gift am I getting my graduate?
Mhm. Yeah.
Do you have any ideas with that in particular?
Well, I think, recognizing maybe who they have been and who they are growing into, and ways that you want to encourage them, and I think love languages is a great model for that, and that we can ask ourselves too, are we expressing our care for them in all of the love languages, even if they tend towards one? they're gonna it's gonna show some variety of appreciation.
Mhm.
And then encouraging the other people around them too to know, like, remember, words are very important to her, or remember, she loves having time with you. So maybe we could do a special afternoon thing the week of graduation where it's just the two of you, or whoever you're helping to kind of include in the celebration. That could be a good guide.
Mhm.
Um,
I also want to bring up food because
mhm,
I think food is such a fun way to celebrate and such a fun way to tailor the celebration to the person because everyone has the food they like. So, what is the food that your child likes? And do a whole thing around that, and make it special and come up with fun recipes and really make that a big deal where you get to like create this menu that's tailor fit to that person, and maybe some things you'll make, some things you'll order so that, it stays
mhm,
within the budget. And then also even decorating, like thinking through how do I honor where they've been, the high school they've been at, or the homeschool, whatever you've done, and kind of celebrate where they're headed. So maybe you order a couple of things from the college bookstore that they're going to, and then you have those at the party and you display those or at the gathering. I mean, I've had cookies made that represent the college that they're going to, and I love that. You can find anybody online that does that, and they create, a few custom cookies, and people don't really eat them. They're more for decoration, really. You can have other desserts out, but that's a fun way also to honor specifically the graduate and where they're going.
mhm. Yeah. So what about big gathering versus small gathering? How do you decide, or do you do both, or do you do neither?
Hmm.
How do you determine that?
I mean, I would really encourage people to mark the moment. So I think whatever you do, whether it's small or big, do something because again, like this is a one and done. This is a one, they graduate from high school one time. So, let's be sure that we're prioritizing that and making room for that and being really intentional. Like I really would say what to do is based on the graduate. And I think it really gets to Alex what you were saying before of what happens when what you want is not what they want. And like maybe a parent doesn't want to go to the work of a party, and so maybe they don't want to give one. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe the parent wants a party and
Mhm.
the graduate doesn't. And so you really do have to work that out. But I mean, fourth time around, my
Mhm.
personal opinion on this, and this is just my opinion, you can disagree, is whatever is going to be fun for the graduate is what we should do because this is their event. They are the ones that have accomplished this and done this. And maybe, like in your case, there's specific people you want there, like
Mhm.
grandparents, and that means a lot, and so you find a way to do that. It's not what you want, it's what they want. So, for example, I have a friend who, when her son graduated, he really did not want a party, and she wanted a party so badly for him.
Mhm.
And she begged him to have one, and he was not having it. And finally, he agreed to a dinner with his close friends. So
Mhm.
there was maybe a group of maybe 8 or 9
Mhm.
young men that went out to dinner together. She made it special and he loved it. And so it ended up being a win-win because
Mhm.
he got to pick it on his terms, what was going to be fun for him. And then she got to honor him. And she, once they decided on that format, then she was able to design some things that felt special and that she felt like she was honoring her son. So
Yeah.
again, you have to just find that third way.
Mhm. Yeah, and to ask yourself, what am I missing out on, or what am I wanting that is not gonna happen here, and how can I make that happen for myself in a different form? So, whether it yeah, just those are the kinds of questions to be reflecting on
Mm-hmm.
as we launch our kids out into the world, and
Mm-hmm.
to say, okay, this is one more opportunity for me to practice this muscle of things are not going to go the way that I would like them to, or that if it was all up to me would go this way, but to loosen the grip a little bit.
Well, and I was just thinking as you were saying, as you were talking, that it doesn't have to look a certain way. Just because everyone else does a party,
Mm-hmm,
you don't have to do a party.
mm-hmm.
Go to the skate plaza and go roller skate and do like a fun neon party at the. I mean, it honestly, like, open up. We can all open up our minds to what that may look like. It doesn't have to be what everyone else is doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just facing our own expectations sometimes and
Mm-hmm.
recognizing, oh, I guess I had expectations. These aren't this particular celebration isn't going to meet them. And what do I need in order to feel celebrated too? Because I'm going to do a shout out to parents.
Yeah.
Good job. If you have a child
Yes.
graduating from high school, good
Mm-hmm.
job. Because this
Mm-hmm.
year, these kids started freshman year, 8th grade, and freshman year in COVID. It has not been an easy go. And so, well done. And you deserve a
Mm-hmm.
little celebration too. But maybe it is not your child's party where that
Mm-hmm.
celebration happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we are going to talk about transitioning into fall, getting our kids ready for fall, maybe getting ourselves ready, but getting our kids ready on a practical level. And we're going to focus this conversation on college specifically, because that's what we've experienced. That's what we're experiencing again this year. And so we're not saying every kid goes to college, but that's what we're going to focus on. So, how do we prepare now for fall so that we aren't scrambling August 15th trying to figure out, one, what our heart is doing, also what our budget is doing, also what our kids are doing. Like, how can we ease into this so that we can enjoy the summer a little bit?
Mm. I'm gonna just talk practical right now. We can get into the
Okay.
heart stuff in a little bit, but I think I'm just gonna talk really practically. First of all, like, budget. It's expensive to launch a kid to college. Like, there's a lot of expenses that go into that, and so really deciding now, what are you going to cover? What is
Mm-hmm.
your child responsible to cover? And how can you be a clear communicator about that? Because they're going to have to plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, how are you planning? So, for example, I was just talking to a friend who is setting money aside every month, starting now until August, in order to have a little bit of cash to be able to spend, when they are going to the Target runs and,
Mm-hmm.
as they're in move in. So that's really smart. That's really
Mm-hmm.
smart to be doing that right now. Think about clothes. Are they going to need different kinds of clothes because they're going to a new place with new weather? Or maybe they just want new clothes for college. Maybe college is kind of a time for them to reestablish their style. I mean, who knows? But how can you help them do that? I mean, is it going to look like buying new outfits? Is it going to look like starting now to visit thrift stores and maybe they recruit a friend who's really good at fashion, who's really good at putting outfits together? And so that person goes with them to thrift stores, or maybe it's a mix of both. Maybe it's buying
Mm-hmm.
some stuff and thrifting some stuff, but whatever it is, like, talk through, do they need gloves and hats, and, what is it that they need, and how can you start looking now for those things instead of waiting until the last minute and now you're panicked because you haven't really thought of that. I would say also, you know, communication, if they know who their roommate is going to be, starting to communicate about what they are going to need and who's bringing what. Because actually, like, if you are going to drive your child to college, that's a huge advantage because you can start looking now for those things. Facebook Marketplace is fantastic for picking up, like, oh, there's a mini fridge. Oh, there's a really nice microwave that no one used. And you can start gathering things. Now, if your child's like mine is going across the country, that's a little bit harder to do. But what I can start doing now is trying to contact someone I know there who we can maybe send some things there, and then deciding with the roommate, okay, what are you responsible for and what are we responsible for? And how can we start planning now for those things?
Yeah, that's really good. We are thinking winter coat because even though she is not switching locations, she's going to be walking a
Yeah,
lot more than from our front door to her car and from her car to
true.
the school. So, just even that, like, what do you need? Do you need a bike? What do you need to be on campus? All of those things, to be thinking about them now and then communicating about who is buying what. And I will say, with our oldest daughter, she bought almost all of her dorm stuff with money she got from college graduation or high school graduation
Mm,
gifts. And we just set out that expectation. Like, we're going to pay for these things, and I'll
mhm.
continue to pay for these things while you're in school. But these are the things from the beginning that you are going to be responsible for. And it's just easier if you say it now than if you say it a week before they go to college.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And like a computer, for example, like
Yeah.
that's a big ticket item.
Hmm.
And they have to have a computer. I mean, that is no longer an option for
Hmm.
kids, really. Not, it's just the way of the world now. And so, like, how are they getting one? And
Hmm.
is that coming from graduation money? Is that a different way? You know,
Hmm.
what does that look like? And
Hmm.
then also, like, it's also thinking about little things. For example, we're going to move in our son across the country. So I've already reserved an SUV because I know we're going to be, even if we send stuff, we're going to be picking boxes up and picking up a mini fridge or whatever. And so I intentionally rented well ahead of time a bigger
Hmm.
car so it's not crazy expensive when I'm getting closer to it. So a bigger car where we can be running around picking things up. So even things like that to be thinking through. Where are you staying during orientation? Do you have a place to stay? Make reservations now. Block it off. Do they need a new doctor or dentist in the place that they're going? Do they have a situation where they need care on a regular basis? If
Hmm.
so, start that now. Don't wait until September and all of a sudden be like, oh my gosh, they need a doctor. And now they can't get an appointment until December.
Hmm.
So, even thinking
Yeah.
through just the practicals like that is so helpful to be thinking about that in May as opposed to right when you're up against the deadline of when they need something.
Hmm. Okay, so we've dropped them off. Then what do? We sit in our cars and cry, which is what I did with my oldest daughter. I cried all the way home.
Ugh,
I mean,
man.
granted, it was only half an hour, but I cried for half an
Uh-huh.
hour.
Mhm.
Um, but what do we do that's going to help us
Mhm.
as we drive away from that drop-off situation?
Yeah. This is so big and everyone does it differently. And so I don't ever want to assume that people are responding in the same way that I
Mhm.
do to kids launching because I know everyone's on a spectrum of happy, sad, and I get that. But for me, every single one has been hard for me because I like having my kids in the nest.
Mhm.
And I love each one of them, and they leave a big hole when they leave. And this one's going to leave a huge hole because he's the last. So we'll be launching into the empty nest. And that feels like an ending, and it feels like grief, and it feels like loss. And I could cry right now just talking about
Mhm.
it. I mean, this is a major transition for parents and for moms in particular. And I just want to say that I'm with you, mom,
Mhm.
out there. My heart is with you. This is hard and there is
Mhm.
grief, and to acknowledge that. And I pre grieve. I mean, I pre grieve for months before they leave. And that's just a part of my process. Not everyone does that.
Mhm.
Knowing that this was going to be hard for me. When our daughter was a senior, so she was our first to launch, we started a tradition And I didn't really even know it was going to be a tradition, but we just decided with her 3 younger brothers underneath her, we were not going to have some time before she left to really be able to kind of talk through all the things I wanted to talk to her about before she went to college. Practical things like budget, like what happens when you're struggling academically? Where do you go? Do you know there's a writing center? Do you know that the most underutilized place in the college is the student life, and they will help you with literally every single thing you need help with? So I mean, just practical things, but also things that I was really worried about. Like, do you know that date rape is real? It's 1 in 4, I think, is the statistic right now. Maybe it's even higher at this point. But do you know that's real? And let's talk about substances. Let's talk about situations you may find yourself in and what to do. Let's talk about the Uber account that we're just going to say, I know a lot of parents have done this, where they say, we will pay for Uber, just to keep that not being an obstacle for kids of like, no, I'm not going to spend the money, so I'm just going to get behind a wheel, or I'm going to get in a car with someone who's been drinking. So, parents just saying, I'm going to cover your Uber, and that's just what I'm going to do, so that you're not tempted to be in a car with someone who's been drinking or smoking. So, some of those kinds of things that we just wanted to cover. So we actually went away for a weekend to the Oregon coast, which is drivable for us. We can drive to the Oregon coast, and it's beautiful. And throughout the weekend, we just talked through various things. So actually on my website, I did a download for people who would want to have those same topics. So I have that. If people want it, we'll put it in the show notes. But throughout the weekend, we just talked about all these things. And then the last night, we actually set up a campfire at the beach. And that was the night, like Eric went down early and kind of built the campfire and got everything ready. And then I brought her down. And we literally just told her, like, this is what it's been like to be your mom. And Eric said, this is what it's been like to be your dad. And this is what we see in you. And this is how we see God has gifted you in the world and who you are. And we prayed over her and her future. And I mean, it was important to me to be able to do that. I mean, I talk about marking the moment. I mean, that was how I wanted to really mark the moment of this transition was, life is going to look differently for us from here forward, but let me just honor you, what I see in you, what our experience has been with you for these first 18 years of your life. And let's bless you as you go into this next season. Now, what that allowed for me on the day of drop off was to just say goodbye. Like, I'd already said everything I wanted to say. I didn't have any pressure on that moment. And it's a good thing, because with every one of my kids, there was something going on that they wanted to rush off to. The last thing they wanted was for me to be having some moment, where I wanted to tell them all these things in that moment. That was not the moment for that. Now, I mean, how can parents do that? Maybe they can't go away for a weekend, but can you do a campfire somewhere in your area? Can you go on a hike, and maybe at the top of the hike, you do that same, maybe on the hike, you're talking about things. And then when you get to the top, you pray over them and you bless their future. So I think there's simple ways, that don't require you going away, but just where you intentionally take that beat to really say your goodbyes before you actually say goodbye.
Yeah. And there are so many things, practical things that you want to cover that maybe you haven't, that you could also do it over every Tuesday morning in the summer. We're going to go out to coffee, and I just want to make sure that we've covered some things, and I have my list, and you might have your list. But then to have that more significant moment where you feel like you really can say, I just love you.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's big. And I want to remind people too that it felt to me like it was gonna sever something. Like this launching and
Mm.
sending into the world was going to sever our relationship. But it really was, we continue to have a relationship. We don't have that day-to-day, like your underwear is
Yeah.
on the bathroom floor kind of
Mhm.
day-to-day stuff. But we do have a lot of week-to-week stuff and things that we're still coaching through. But also, our relationship isn't over. And it just felt like the anticipation was so much worse than the relationship that continued after, where I was surprised because I had made it out for my first to be like, we're never going to see her again. like we
Mhm.
were losing her somehow. And we weren't losing her.
Yes.
So
It's just different. And
it's
I think
just different.
it's that I love that you say that you are bringing this up and that you, I think you're just bringing a really important point to the table that it's a new beginning and we just have to shift and
Mm-hmm.
change. And how we do that is really important because to just want I mean, of course there's a part of us that just wants things to stay the same, and that's natural and normal. But actually, as we adapt and change with them, and as we kind of move into this new season, that brings some really beautiful new things into your
Mm-hmm.
relationship that you didn't have when you were really, parenting them actively in those teenage years. There's a little more of this freedom and a little more of this going into that a different role as a
Mm-hmm.
parent, and that actually is fun
Mm-hmm.
and can really add a lot of lightness to the relationship. Have you found that?
Oh, for sure. There are some things now where I'm like, you know what? It is not my job to decide this for you. And I'm really happy about that. Like, I decided so many things for you for a long time, and you get to decide this now. You get to.
Mhm.
And I really, really have enjoyed that. And I also want to say, not every teenager that is heading off to school is going to be super excited about having real heart-to-heart conversations.
Yeah.
Um, and so to recognize that too, but like you said, you needed to have at least one moment for you. I think that's okay. As a mom, if you feel like we need to have this one conversation because I need to have it, you've earned that, mom.
Mm.
You've earned the
Yes.
right to say, you
Yes.
know what, for an hour, I get you. I
Mhm.
get to have this. But also to not beat yourself up if your son or daughter is like, I am so not into this right now, because they're dealing with all of their own feelings of fear and change. And that's coming out perhaps in a way that feels like they're pushing you away. But that's a natural response of self-protection because they've got grief. They've got a lot going on. And we're going to push against mom always because mom's always going to be there. So let's decide together that we're not going to take that too personally and decide that we're failures as parents when that happens, but to say, wow, this is hard for all of us, and
Mhm.
maybe we can have some of these conversations a month from now or at Thanksgiving. There will be more open doors for that later when they have realized too, oh, I am going to survive this and I am going to be okay. And my parents maybe do know more than I was giving them credit for,
Well,
which
and
is
I
always delightful.
and I think it's a good time for us to practice. We are a soft place to land for
Mm-hmm.
you. And so that means that wherever you are in this moment, we are here. And you can land here softly, and there's psychological safety here, and it's okay to make mistakes here. And, just kind of just being patient with each other. This is, and I just also want to say this time between when a senior graduates from high school and when they launch to college, that's a little bit of a weird time. And
Mm-hmm.
you'll see their friends going off the rails even a little bit. And so just being patient with everybody involved, with you yourself, but also
Mm-hmm.
with your child, that this is a big transition for them and for their friends. And there's just a lot going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there is. So let us know how it goes this summer and then as you drop off your child.
Mhm.
And yeah, and let's check in with each other as friends,
Mhm.
especially if maybe you don't have a senior this year, but you have friends who do. Or maybe you just have a friend who has a young adult where the plans aren't really going the way that everyone pictured they would right
Mhm.
now. And to just check in with mom and say, I know you're a great mom. I know things might be hard right now, and I'm here for you. I'm cheering for you. I'm cheering for your child. We're on your team, and not every child walks a straight path from A to B. That
Mhm.
there can be some curly cues along the way, and maybe B moves. Maybe the end goal moves, and that's okay too.
Mhm.
Okay, well, any any final words, Krista, for our listeners as we end this conversation?
Yeah, I would just say hold those two things of the sadness and the grief in one hand, but then also hold the hope and the fun and the joy just as equally in the other. And do your best to honor yourself in the process and honor what's
Mhm.
happening inside of you, and lean in to enjoying the journey and enjoying the present with your child. You only get to do this one time, where they're graduating from high school and transitioning to a new chapter in this way, in this particular way. And so enjoy it, have fun, and really, as much as you can, set your mindset to be looking for opportunities for joy in the process. And it does make a huge difference when we're doing that.